Hello everyone, this is AndresRestart, and this time we are talking about what may be our most detailed look at Nintendo Switch 2 yet. Now this information, or this set of imagery, is coming from two different places, two different Chinese accessory manufacturers that are providing different perspectives on the Switch 2. And I should point out that none of what we're seeing here is going to be the absolute final version of Switch 2, but at least one of them, many people seem to think, is probably the most detailed version yet, the most up-to-date version yet, and then another looks a lot like some prior things we've seen, but might also be giving us the best size comparison we've gotten. So it's all very interesting in my opinion, and that's what we're getting into today. But before going forward, let me take this moment to ask that if you do enjoy my content, to please subscribe and hit that notification bell, and if you're unsure, watch through this video and then consider subscribing and hitting that bell. So I will be getting into these Switch 2 images that were posted on Facebook, but first let's focus on this video that was posted by SwitchUp yesterday. So SwitchUp, a YouTube channel that covers Nintendo Switch, was contacted by a Chinese accessory manufacturer, and they were sent over a 3D print of the Switch 2. They were told that this is what information they were provided, and so they put together an approximation of what the Switch 2 will be, and that's what they're building their accessories around. And so I'll show some pics of the video here. Here you can see the case, and here we see the name of the brand. Ivolair, I'm not sure that's how it's pronounced or not, but that's the name I see. And SwitchUp shows different perspectives of this Switch 2, this 3D print of a Switch 2, not the final version, likely a prototype, but in comparison to the Joy-Cons, to the Steam Deck, and so we get some interesting perspective here. Here we can see just how much bigger the screen protector for a Switch 2 is compared to the Switch, or how much bigger the supposed Switch 2 is compared to the OLED tablet, or even how it compares to the Steam Deck. You can see here, looking at this comparison, it's an interesting difference. But we also get a nice close-up look of a standard size Joy-Con for Switch 1 versus these new Switch 2 Joy-Cons. And there is a notable difference in size here. But perhaps what I found most interesting from this footage is what they showed at the top. SwitchUp showed the supposed heating vent and how it's significantly larger than the heating vent for Switch 1. Now, this is a bigger console, a more powerful console. They likely need a bigger heating vent, but it's still interesting to see. Now, something else that I found to be a bit surprising were the volume buttons. They're actually smaller, but they're also more pronounced. They may be a bit easier to press, which I think is a good thing. You should be able to hold your Switch 2 without having to look around, but rather just feel around and know exactly where the volume buttons are and be able to press them quite easily, or for that matter, really any button on the controller. And I'll also say we get a close look at the shoulder buttons for the supposed Switch 2. Again, this is a 3D print of a model or dimensions that Nintendo's likely sent over to different accessory makers, so this isn't going to be exactly how the console will look. But we do get a nice look at the shoulder buttons there, and they look to be quite ergonomic. So if that's how they end up looking, I think I will be ultimately pleased with those buttons. But what you may be noticing about this overall set of imagery here is that it looks a lot like prior Switch 2 leaks, which is just a bigger Switch tablet with bigger white Joy-Cons, but there's an extra button on the right Joy-Con. We do also have those bigger buttons on the backs of the Joy-Cons that we believe are likely just to disengage the Joy-Cons from its magnetic hold on the Switch 2 tablet, but that's pretty much it. This is really more of the same, but just footage that gives us a better look, better angles of this supposed Switch 2 prototype here. What I have found a bit more interesting are these images from another Switch 2 accessory, a Switch 2 silicone case, that seems to be of a more up-to-date model of the Switch 2. So looking at some of the imagery here we see a blue Switch 2. Reminder, this is a silicone case covering the Switch 2. This is not actually the Switch 2. And this likely also is a render. I think that's actually probably pretty obvious. but there are some interesting details that we've noticed that are different from prior looks at the console. Now, something that I think is really nice to point out simply right here is that looking straight here at the extra button that the right Joy-Con has, it looks very clearly like a C button. Not a circle, but a C button, and there's been some uncertainty about what this button actually represents, but at least with us seeing more clearly that it's a C button, I think we can take a moment to consider that maybe it's a capture button. However, we still have the button on the left, which is what was used for captures on the Switch 1, but maybe one button is more so about taking snapshots, while the other is more about recording footage, although I feel like maybe those could still just be one button, in my opinion. I would hope that this extra button is for another feature, maybe a communication feature. Or maybe it's not even necessarily a letter C, but more like perhaps for recording your voice. But anyway, looking beyond that, what else can we glean from this imagery here? Well, looking at this backside, we can see the U-shaped kickstand, and a lot of the 3D prints for the Switch 2 prototype have not included this U-shaped kickstand that we have heard from other leaks. And so I'm very curious on how this U-shaped kickstand is going to work in comparison to the Switch OLED kickstand and the Switch 1 kickstand. I'm going to assume that it's at least going to feel better than the Switch 1 kickstand, which just kind of falls off and is just a little flap on one side, so your Switch definitely falls over quite easily. This is probably more sturdy than that, but how does it compare to the Switch OLED kickstand that's a lot thicker? Only time will tell. But here's a little bit more imagery. We get to see some other sides to the Switch 2, the top and the bottom sides. You'll see that heating vent there that we talked about earlier. You'll also notice that there's two different USB-C ports here, the audio jack where you would put in the Switch 2 cases. Here on the back side, we have another look at it, right? We still see where the kickstand would be, but also you see these two notches here. I believe this would be for where it would connect to the dock. So they're probably just indentations to help it fit in a little bit better. Now, if you look here, it's a little subtle because, well, the actual case is obscuring a little bit, but we do see the volume buttons right here. And then we have this circle here. I'm not entirely sure what it is. I've seen some people speculate on what it might be, and so we'll get to that in a moment. Now, here's another image of this Switch 2 case. We can see how the Joy-Cons are separated from the tablet. We can still see that it has the bigger SL and SR buttons. And so this isn't really any new information. We're just seeing the Switch 2 with, or a version of the Switch 2, I should say. Probably still not the final version, but we can see it with this silicone case covering them separated here, not just in all one piece. But we have a little bit more to look at here. So, Universal Nintendo went ahead and pointed out what they believe to be the different elements of the Switch 2, and there are some things here that I think are very much worth talking about here. So remember that circle I said I wasn't sure? Well, they are speculating, hence the question mark, that this is a lighting sensor. And so we've noticed from the screen protectors of the Switch 2 that we have seen that they no longer have that circular notch on the front side for a lighting sensor. And so we've thought that maybe the lighting sensor is just totally gone, but the speculation here would be suggesting more so that it's simply been moved to a different part of the system, not where the screen would be. So maybe that's the case. Now, I didn't speak too much on this before, but yeah, we do have two different USB-C ports, and I think that's actually going to be a pretty big deal because you'll be able to connect two different peripherals or accessories that would use the USB-C port, or just have your Switch 2 charging on one side while taking advantage of the other, or not even necessarily using both. If you are playing in tabletop mode, you will not have access to the bottom USB-C port, but you will have access to the top one. So if you want to continue charging your Switch 2 while playing in tabletop mode, you will be able to do this with this second USB-C port. So really, having two different ports, one on each bottom or top half of the Switch 2, offers a lot more options here, which I think is a very good thing. Now, something else I didn't notice that they're pointing out here is that there's this other smaller hole right next to the Switch cartridge opening, or the Switch 2 cartridge opening. And Necrofelipe is speculating that it is a microphone. Now, we did just talk about how maybe that extra button could be for capturing audio, for maybe when you're playing an online game you want to send some sort of audio message. Maybe that's where the microphone might be to do that. Now, I will say that it's on the top right part of the Switch 2. If you're holding this in handheld mode, is that really where you're going to have the microphone? Maybe just recording an overall audio space, maybe somewhat similar to the Wii Speak from back in the day. So maybe it actually is a little microphone hole there, but I'm not entirely sure. But anyways, this appears to be our most detailed look at the console yet. We see the U-shaped kickstand, we see the 2 different USB-C ports. These are things we haven't seen in a lot of these supposed 3D prints of the Switch 2, and really I think these are some important features. Now, something else that I think is worth noting here is that we don't actually get to see how the Joy-Cons look really. We just see the black control sticks, we just see the black buttons. We don't see the other buttons, we don't see the color of the face buttons. And so if this is a more final look of the Switch 2, but you can't tell because it's being covered by a case, maybe we do have those colored buttons we've been theorizing on for, what, over a year already? Of course, again, this is likely still not the final version of the Switch 2, this is just a render here, right? But it does seem to be the most detailed look yet. So what do you think? What do you make of what we're seeing of these different accessories and how they're sort of highlighting different elements of the Switch 2? Let me know in the comments below. This is AndresRestart. Thank you so much for listening and watching, and I'll see you all really soon. Take care. Bye.